Hello everybody, it is Lythaniel, the reviewer here with the first impressions of the Philips Compact Pasta Maker. Just gonna make a couple different pastas and go over my initial thoughts with them. So just doing a quick little once over of the machine. Here up top you have different modes. To the right is the auto function, well, to mix and extrude. To the left is extrude plus. That's just gonna be if you got last little bits of pasta and you wanna do a quick little extrusion. Inside there you can see the little tines as those spin and the little corkscrew which will push out the pasta. Here on the top of the lid you will see some little slots. There's just two little slots there that let the liquid ingredients pour onto the flours. I do think that it is a little bit too small though initially. I wish they did stretch them out a little bit more, but that's okay. Just right there is a little storage container where you can place the additional dies. It comes with three. One is always on the machine, so you'll just keep the two in there. There are some additional dies you can buy. So I did actually buy them, so I will be testing those out. To disassemble the machine, you'll just take these little parts off here. And to get this little piece out, you're actually just gonna pull the little slot out, and it's actually pretty simple. Didn't have any issues there. It's pretty easy to clean. I had no issues going on there. And just to reassemble, you'll just kind of do everything in reverse. So you'll get that little corkscrew there, just place that in there, and you'll position that little tines, just kind of get that to go through, and you may have to twist that little corkscrew just to get the little hexagon to fit into the machine. And to get the dies back on, you're gonna look for that little triangle right there and just place that up top so it's always at the 12 o'clock position. Just press the die on and tighten it with the screw cap. Just make sure it's finger tight, and from there let's make some pasta. So I got 200 grams of unbleached all-purpose flour. You want to make sure it doesn't go on to where the corkscrew is. If it does, it's not the end of the world, but you just want to avoid it if possible. Get the machine started, just turn it to the right, press that little play button, and it's going to start automatically spinning. Inside I do have 100 grams. I've got one beaten egg and enough water to make it about 100 milliliters. I believe it does want it to have initially 75 milliliters of liquid, but unfortunately I did rough pour a little bit too much. So you're gonna see in a little bit that this dough gets a little bit too wet, and it kind of becomes a little bit of an issue, and I do make it a little bit better going forward. So from here, I'll get a little close-up of the machine so you can kind of see it spin, and it's just gonna do this for about maybe 3, 4, 5 minutes, and it's automatically gonna extrude. But other than that, there's nothing else to do. Just let the machine do its work. So time goes on, and one thing you'll notice, once it's done, it's gonna give about 3 little beeps, and then it's gonna come back around and start the extrusion process. From there, it's just gonna slowly pour out. I've got the spaghetti die on there, and just give it a little bit of cut, and just even initially grabbing it, it's a little bit too wet. I did use a little bit too much water, but this was my first time, so I will say that this machine definitely is a learning experience. You definitely will need some practice just sticking to the measurements for the ingredients. You know, you definitely don't want to go too dry, and you don't want to go too wet. You really got to stick with the measurements that they give you until you kind of really get better with different flours and liquid ingredients. Stick to what they ask. So here, of course, you can see since it is so wet, it all pretty much clumped into one big piece, and if you get that, it's not going to be able to get that dough to that corkscrew for the extrusion. So you're going to have to either kind of break it up and let the machine run again. And you know, again, I do run into that issue a little bit more, so hey, it's kind of a learning experience. Here I'm switching to a plastic scraper just to be a little bit more gentle on the machine, but you know, any little scraper you got is fine. Put it in a little circle once you get your pasta to the desired length, and just keep waiting for more to come out. I do run into that issue again where it does clump up because I did use too much liquid ingredients. So I am going to add a little bit of flour here, you'll see in a second, because you're just going to have to do something. If your pasta's too wet, you need to dry it out. If it's too dry, you need to get a little bit wet. So from there, this did work a little bit better. So once you let that pasta kind of dry out and get crumbly, it will be easier for it to get to the corkscrew in bits and chunks and extrude. Now, once the pasta maker is done with the first pass, it is automatically going to go back in reverse. This will just make sure it gets as much pasta as it can to regather it to try to extrude as much as possible. It'll do that maybe about 2 or 3 times before it fully shuts off. Again, if it does any kind of little sticking bits, just grab whatever piece you can, break it up just to make the machine easier. You know, as long as you're not mixing the dough right, you may just have to intervene a little bit. And honestly, I didn't have that much of an issue with it. Just note simply, if the pasta is too big, it's just not gonna get to the extruder and go through the corkscrew. So once you give it enough time, it's just going to complete everything again. It's automatic. Once it's done, it's gonna give you about 6 beeps. That'll let you know it's finished, and you can go from there. Looking over the pasta from this first batch, it was separated, but it was really it was stickier than it needed to be. So you'll kind of see it looks like a little bit of a Twizzler candy, that little pull apart candy. And they did separate enough, but with it being so wet, it was more of a challenge to, you know, have separate strands. So again, one thing I think I will note, just if you are gonna make the spaghetti, definitely make sure the noodles aren't too wet, or you're gonna be doing this all day. And it may break up in the water, it may not, but you know, this kind of becomes a bit of a hassle. It wouldn't be as bad with the fettuccine one maybe, or the pin pasta one, but yeah, you're gonna make note of that. So for batch number 2, I am gonna go ahead and try this on another die. There I make a big mess, but let's go ahead and just knock that off. Here I'm gonna switch out the pasta die from the spaghetti to the pin die. It's give you a little bit of a tube shape, which is kind of nice if you're more of a tube man rather than spaghetti. Again, go open that bottom drawer. You can swap them out there. You don't really want to put dirty ones in there. Just look for that little triangle again, put that at the 12 o'clock position, and you're pretty much all switched out. If you're gonna be making pasta one after the other, you don't have to clean the machine or anything like that. As long as the pasta extruded fine, you can go ahead and put the new batch in there. So this one again was 200 grams all-purpose flour. I did more accurately measure the liquid ingredients to 75 milliliters as recommended, and I poured it in much slower than usual. And you're gonna see this batch comes out much better. It's gonna be much more crumbly compared to the one large mass of dough. Just a quick note on the machine itself, it doesn't get hot to the exterior at all, and surprisingly it is much quieter than I thought it would be, so I have to give it credit. It's not something that's gonna wake up any kind of neighbors or anything like that, like maybe a Vitamix would. So here you see, once it's done with the mixing, it's gonna switch to the extrusion, and right off the bat, it's gonna be a little scraggly and shaggy coming out for the first little bit, but once you just cut those uneven parts off, from there it's smooth sailing. But yeah, you'll see it's just, that's the consistency you want to aim for a little bit more, so it is breaking apart and those tines can spin to actually get the dough to the corkscrew and actually extrude it out. This one's always going to kind of be curved, so the pastas will be, they can be a little straight, but they also can be curved, so what comes out is what you get. So yeah, just go ahead and keep going, keep cutting, and it doesn't take that long for it to extrude everything, so I didn't have a problem really going through it. It really might just, you know, take 4 or 5 minutes. It's gonna stop itself. It's gonna do the remix again to get any loose pieces of dough, and I was pretty happy with the process, to be honest. They did have a little crack coming out of one of the dies, but you know, that's just learning curve. I'm sure as I get better, you know, as you saw right there, one of those 6-headed. But, you know, other than that, it boiled up fine, had no issues with it. So I was pretty happy with what it spit out. For this last dough, it's just gonna be actually an all semolina mix. So I'm gonna use some semolina flour right there. That's from the Bob's Red Mill. Again, now what they did recommend was 150 grams of the semolina and 50 grams of all-purpose flour. So I did that to get the 200, and again, just the 75 milliliters of the egg water mixture, and we'll pour that in. So here What I'm gonna do is actually let it run a little bit just to better incorporate the semolina and all-purpose and homogenize it. But again, just pour slow, take your time with it. You can feel like, you know, you'll think you might want to rush because it's just those openings are so small and you get those two little slots, but take your time with it. Don't let it clump up, and you're gonna get better results. I did switch out the dye again. I do have the fettuccine dye on there now just to see how that one mixes up and let the machine do its thing. So I did throw a little bit of flour on the plate this time to get some flour on the bottom because again, the name of the game is no sticking. So it's just gonna, you know, keep mixing and mixing. Once it stops, go ahead and go into the extrusion process. Again, the mix nice and crumbly, and you let it extrude. Cut off the little craggly bits, or if you want, but you really don't have to. And again, it's gonna come out just whichever way it wants to, but gravity, you get to it sooner or later. Let the fettuccine come out. You let it be as long as you want, as short as you want. But yeah, it was a good speed for the extrusion. Just kind of let them fall wherever you want. No issues with the machine so far. It's doing its job. The pasta looked really nice. Once it does come out of that dye though, you will notice it is a little bit scraggly, but I actually don't mind because I almost want to compare it to more of a bronze dye pasta where it gives you that rough surface that'll better hold on to the sauces. So I'm actually not even complaining about that. You know, you don't want it to be perfectly smooth. You want it to have a little bit of a rough exterior. So once it's done, this part I did have to take it out a little bit, and it just got stuck in some parts, which I really wouldn't fault the machine. It's just really all in the dough that you prepare. It was still pretty crumbly, so I was able to get a little bit more out of it. You see it's still in those pieces, so it's gonna be able to get to the corkscrew much better than just being one big lumpy mass. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the machine. It's gonna be a while before I can do a full review to really say what I think about it. You know, longevity does matter, but yeah, it's nice. I've never had fresh pasta, to be honest. It's always been dry, pre-packaged, so it was pretty cool to have fresh pasta whenever I want. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Have you had the machine before? Have you used it? Or any, you know, even a manual machine? What do you think about it? And send me some questions, and I'll see you guys next time. Later.